Take a look and you'll see into your imagination. Welcome this morning to Land of Pure Imagination. I have to tell you, I am so absolutely excited about today.
Let's say more than excited.
More than excited.
Way more than excited.
I sat outside almost all day yesterday just writing and creating and going back in time, recapturing my kid. And I woke up and it was like Christmas morning. I was just really, really excited. And I am so glad you have joined us today.
So welcome to the Land of Pure Imagination. We're glad that you have joined us. And here in this time, we are going to explore another level of imagination. Last week on Duzie Live, we talked about the 4 seeds of imagination. It was like planning and putting it in and making the ground right. This week, we're going to go to the land of pure imagination.
I put on my special imagination shirt today. I have some outfits that I have a pair of shoes. I should have brought them. That when I put them on, I know I'm going to create.
Yes.
I found this shirt in a box of costumes, I guess you'd say, but there were things that I once used and I haven't used them for a long time.
Originally, it came from a thrift store. This was a great find.
This was when I was in college.
Oh, excuse me.
It was a thrift store, but when I was in college.
Yeah. Okay, sorry, a college thrift store. That is different.
Just look at this. This is my imagination shirt.
Well, you got to show the back if you can. It says, Zap. Can you see it? It's an amazing shirt. Yeah, and he's been just like fluttering about in the land of pure imagination.
But I am really, really, I think I always say I'm really excited about today, but I am really excited about today.
Did he say he was really excited? He is.
We're going into spaces that I have not opened up in a very, very long time. Matter of fact, as Susie and I were having breakfast this morning,
Megan said, and it still fits.
Well,
use your imagination a little.
It doesn't quite go down to the belt anymore. I'm not sure what happened. Maybe my belt got lower.
Maybe it shrunk.
It shrunk up. Incredible.
Something shrunk.
But during breakfast this morning, I was sitting across from Susie and we were singing Land of Pure Imagination. And
at the top of our lungs.
I got a moment of fear because one of the last times I really dove into some of these things, I was told to grow up. I was told to move past that. And it was like, can I go there this morning? And it was like, that's okay. It's like, yes, I can and I want to.
Okay. So we're going there. You can live in a world of pure imagination by taking 2 steps. The first step is to recapture your kid. And Dan's going to take us to that space, recapturing our kid. And the second is to rewire your brain. And I'm going to take you to that space.
So what we're going to do is we're going to move forward. But before we start, because this is the land of pure imagination, I opened up song lyrics. And is it all right if we can go here for a moment?
Yeah, just 1 second, though. I just want to say hi to a few people.
Oh, okay.
We're just so excited. We forgot to say hi. So thank you for going into the chat space. And thank you for putting a little something there. Tell us where you're coming from. Those who have been here before, you're doing it. So Megan's coming from Sheffield, UK. Thank you, Megan, for liking my hair. It did what it wanted today.
And mine.
Helen is back with us from the UAE. Thank you for coming back. David's going to help us out in the chat space to make sure that we don't miss anything. David Taylor.
Come on into the land.
Yes, come on. Megan loves that your shirt still fits. We've got Richard Houston coming from Hamburg, Germany. Us Deutschland. And we've got Cheryl Potter and Don Potter there. And I'm sure there's more. I just
want you to know, Mom and Dad, I'm talking about you today.
Okay, prepare yourself. And you can fact check anytime. Anytime you can fact check. Well, they can imaginatively fact check.
How do you fact check someone's imagination?
This is true. Okay, now you can go where you want to go.
You can pretend to fact check. Anyway. So I want to put up.
Megan says your hair is amazing as always.
Thank you.
Dan.
Does this not look like some kind of a scary bug? Anyway, these are my quarantine goggles. Can you see they got the little quarantine thing? Maybe that's nuclear. I don't know. But here we go. Let me show you the slide on Pure imagination. Now, I just want you to take your brain for a moment and lay down in the dirt. Okay, you're laying down in the dirt.
Your brain is in the dirt?
You're laying in the dirt.
Okay, great.
In a beautiful garden. And you just sort of are waking up and open your eyes, and a little bit of dirt is just falling off your skin. And you look into the face of your creator. Your name is Adam.
Okay.
And God,
as in Adam and Eve.
Yeah. God looks at you. And this is what I've thought for years. This song only fits that moment of time and every moment with his creation sense. But God looks down and he begins to say these words. Adam, come with me, and you'll be in a world of pure imagination. Take a look and you'll see into your imagination. We'll begin with a spin, traveling in the world of my creation. What you'll see will define explanation.
Explanation.
Do you imagine Adam at that moment trying to figure this all out? It defies explanation. And then he leans really close and he says, if you want to view paradise, simply look around and view it. Anything you want to do, do it. Want to change the world? There's nothing to it. It wasn't do it because it was just God. Anyway, there's no life I know that compares to pure imagination. Living there, you'll be free.
Free.
If you truly wish to be. This song, I probably play at least once a week throughout my life. There is this connection to God. I hate to say it, but it's probably my favorite worship song. When I turn that on, me and God go places together. And I just wanted to call today Land of Pure Imagination because I believe in the faith especially, we don't move into these spaces very well. We move into spaces of, I will do this because it will produce something. The land of pure imagination does produce something, but there is such an enjoyment of stepping into the things that are just up here, the things that have never been, that we could maybe call forth. And so for me, that is a part of my worship experience with God often is this song about pure imagination.
Yeah, so Benjamin Thomas is joining. This is my brother. He's coming all the way from Poland.
Ben.
Hi. Thank you for joining us. One thing that it was really amazing yesterday. He dropped a little video into our family chat yesterday, and he had his daughter in a box with goggles on, big goggles. I don't know if the goggles, later I was thinking, I don't know if she was experiencing it herself, but she had goggles on. And he had on the screen behind it was like a roller coaster, a Disney roller coaster. And he had her in the box and he was going up and down. And I was like, oh, I love that. That is such a picture of pure imagination.
Now there's a time that you want
to be VR goggles.
You want to be put in the box in those moments. Ben, if you come here, I'll get in the box. You can lift me up and I'll have that experience.
So she was having the VR experience with her goggles, but Papa Benny was taking her on the ride, moving it. Oh, I was like, I want to go on that ride. Could you please put me in the box and take me on that ride? I would love it. She got to experience the ride in first person. Yeah, I love that. Thank you for sharing that. That you facilitated her pure imagination and took her into that space that we're talking about all day today. I love that.
So here's where we're going to go this morning. I've been writing a lot. My journal is full of stuff. I wish I could just.
Did he say full? It's full.
If I could just get my rocking chair out and you guys could gather around, I would just read. I just said to Susie today, one of the favorite things lately I have to read is my journal. It has just been bubbling
full of imagination,
with incredible things about imagination, things I either haven't thought about for years or brand new things.
Yeah.
And so I thought, how do I take that? And I don't want to just sit here and read to you. I think that would be incredibly boring because imagination happens in the mind. So I recorded me reading some of the things that I have written, and this is going to come out in a booklet that later on you can get in our course.
our flow course for those of you who are in it, coming soon.
But I would rather go into the chat room with you and talk about these things through the chat as I roll the video. Now, the video is a little long because this imagination is very big. And the land of it, this is like the journey back in time. This is recapturing my kid, which it's been so much fun going there. I don't want to leave that space. And so I'm going to roll a video, and it's going to be about 10 minutes long. And there's music, there's different things. But I would love for you, as you go through, to get stuck in some places. Get stuck in some of those things like, wait, I haven't thought about that, or is that true, or whatever. And then take your stuckiness into the chat, and I'll be there, and Suzie will be there, and we just want to chat as this whole thing goes on. So this is a very active watching, listening moment into the land of pure imagination.
So once again, let me just say, we're going to roll the video, which is Dan sharing all of his thoughts that he took, years to prepare. And then he put it down, and then he's put a lot of visuals, which I think is stunning. To me, the time went by just like that when I was watching it. But we want you not to wait till the end to make your chats. If something sparks in the midst of this memoir, we want you to just write it in the chat, and we'll be doing two things at once, which many of you can do.
And as soon as we're done, we're going to just do some feedback on this before we move ahead to the next area. So we're going to digest this. So this is like, you're going to sit down for a meal of imagination. Open up wide, because here it comes.
Megan just wants to encourage you, not boring at all, not boring. And David said, Dan, having a big imagination is maybe the least surprising thing I've heard this week.
Well,
so true.
I already gave a fantastic intro into the video.
So let's roll it, hey?
Let's roll it, yeah.
Okay, let's go.
Here we go. A memoir of imagination. I was born at a very young age with a great sense of imagination, as was every other human child who's ever been created in the image of God. My imagination grew as I was given permission to live fully alive by cultivating wonder, curiosity, and adventure, which I gladly did. I come from a very normal family of great Imagineers, people, simple people, who daily use stories from the past to build connections towards the future. I could not read until I was a teenager. I'm dyslexic, which means I am highly creative. My brain is always building new images and connections. Thus, letters and words and numbers and even concepts are always seen by my brain as new, like something I've never seen before. Thus, reading, writing, and arithmetic for me, they were quickly replaced by reinventing connections through creativity, change, and community. My mom, because I couldn't read, would tell me stories about God and our heritage. She would read Disney relentlessly to me, and my imagination grew wildly. My dad would take me to the wood shop and show me a dead tree stump. He would cut it into slices to show me what he could see on the inside. And then he would create from the stump a beautiful clock, just like he imagined. My great-grandfather, O.P. Eastman, would look across the river and create images of a bridge in his mind. He would later build those bridges all across Michigan. My grandpa Baldwin, on Thanksgiving Day, would look high up in the pine trees and point to one treetop. He could see in his imagination which top 8 feet would make the best Christmas tree. Then he would climb up the tree and bring it down for me to see. My Grandma B, as she lay on her deathbed, would lift her old vein-covered hands and play the piano as she saw it in her imagination, just like it had always been at the edge of her fingerprints. Everyone, I believe, was created with imagination. and expected to keep it growing throughout their whole life. But sadly, according to Professor Ken Robinson, kids today start losing their imagination as soon as they enter school. But that doesn't seem to bother most people because they only want kids to grow up and join the chorus of productive adults who long to exploit knowledge only to solve problems, rather than explore thinking through imagination to discover and rediscover several possibilities of connection. When I was 12 years old, I surprisingly learned that I had not lost my imagination. Up to that time, I believed everyone was living in the land of pure imagination. But then I preached my first sermon. It was at a church district event where teens could perform a talent. Now, I was a young magician, but they didn't have a category for me, so I chose preaching. And my 10-minute message was the gospel according to Willy Wonka. It was amazing. I talked about the golden ticket. Everyone on earth could find one. I talked about Jesus like the candy man. He could take the sunrise and sprinkle it with dew. He could take a rainbow and wrap it with a sigh. He could take tomorrow and dip it in a dream, all to make the world taste good. There were also the children in the chocolate factory, all who had received a golden ticket, but they lacked the fruit of the Spirit, especially self-control, and lost the treasure. But there was one named Charlie, who also had taken what was not his and touched what he was not supposed to touch, but through confession and connection, he won the heart of the Creator, thus winning the entire kingdom. Now, understand, the judges at this event, a panel of distinguished pastors, could not see what I could see. They told me this: stick to the word. Wow, it broke my heart because I met God in that story, as well as so many others. The Wizard of Oz was clearly about God's value of thinking, having a heart, courage, and the sense of belonging. Chitty Chitty Bang Bang was joyfully announcing the value of childlike imagination against the kingdom of darkness. There was Snow White, Cinderella, The Jungle Book, Pinocchio, and a host of other books and movies that took me into worlds much like my own, where new beginnings were possible through transformation, from death by resurrection into life. Only believe. Psalms 19:1-2 says, "All heaven declares the glory of God. The skies proclaim the works of his hands. Day after day they pour forth speech. Night after night they reveal knowledge." Look around. Look up. The sound of God's voice is everywhere. It's in our books and movies and songs. No matter who wrote them or who sung them, they're there. They're in our cities and in our country, in the oceans and the mountains, along the trails we walk, and in the places we dare not even go. God's storehouse is everywhere that imagination allows us to flow. But so many people I have met could not see any of this with their imagination. In Matthew 13:34 it says, Jesus spoke all these things to the crowd in parables. He did not say anything to them without using a parable. He was talking to people's imagination, giving them something to explore rather than a piece of knowledge to exploit. He did not come to solve a problem through grand pieces of information, but instead, he came that we might have life through imagination. I have faithfully attended 4 different Bible colleges and universities, all preparing me to communicate the gospel of Jesus to the next generation around the world. But none of them, that's right, none of them offered courses on imagination, parables, or storytelling. But that is exactly how Jesus changed the world. If we have faith, according to Hebrews 11:6, we have chosen to believe with our imagination that God exists and that God, whom we imagine, will reward us when we seek him through our imagination. And it is impossible to please God without the belief we have seen in our imagination, which is also called faith. Read the whole chapter of Hebrews 11. It is all about people who saw and experienced God through their imagination. I belong to the greatest nation on earth, and it is called imagination. It is the place from which I see light, I live life, and I love myself, my world, and my God. It's interesting that the word imagination comes from two very important words, image and notion. Image is something you can see, but also we must remember that we were created in the image of God. Notion, on the other hand, is a conception or belief about something. So imagination must be a place in our brain which is like God, that enables us to be able to conceive or believe something not real into reality. Thus we must recapture our imagination by returning to our sense of wonder, curiosity, and adventure. The modern world leads us to believe there are only 5 senses: sight, sound, touch, smell, and taste. But imagination also demands we explore our forgotten sense of wonder, curiosity, and adventure. I am who I am today because I live fully alive through my imagination. I hear God's voice. I dream his dreams. I see his kingdom coming. I create unforgettable moments. I experience the future. And I work in the power of God's Spirit because imagination for me is real. I choose to believe, and so can you. The Passion Translation in Matthew 18:3 puts it this way: learn this well. Unless you dramatically change your way of thinking and become teachable and learn about heaven's kingdom realm with wide-eyed wonder of a child, you will never be able to enter in. May you be blessed to see your life, your world, and your God vividly and with vibrancy as you recapture your God-given imagination through a sense of wonder, curiosity, and adventure, to believe beyond what your eyes can see. This has been my memoir of imagination.
All right.
Oh, wow.
Welcome back. Thank you for you chatting in the midst of that. There's a number of things that came up there that...
Sorry, the volume wasn't as loud as it could be. We couldn't change it from this point, but hopefully you heard it all.
Such an amazing video, Michaela said. That went so quickly. Helen, I told you that was the way it was. It was for me as well. It's just like, woo, zoom. 10 minutes are gone. That's the way it is.
Just wait for the imagination course to come out as part of Flow. We did Courageous, and next is Imagination that we're coming out with. It's going to be bigger than I thought because there's so much there to unpack. And I believe it all is there to release you to move into that land of pure imagination. Imagination can cause you to look across the lake or the river and build the bridge. But imagination also can be your worst enemy and cause you to jump off the bridge. So we want to make sure it's pure imagination, not imagination of darkness.
Yeah, the imagination. Now, there was something in there, and we talked quite a bit about it last week, but I want to bring it up again. When we talk imagination, there is the concept of faith, like Hebrews 11:6 talks about. Without faith, it's impossible to please God, and imagination. And so when we're saying imagination and faith, those two words for us are very interchangeable. We use them in the same way. So everything we learn in the Bible and experientially with God about faith and having faith to please God is the imagination, because you have to get there in your mind, in your spirit, in your emotions many times before you can be there. We're going to talk about in a little bit about how to rewire your brain, the mind-body connection. But we want to stay on this recapture your kid for a few moments. And Megan, I just want to read a part of what you said, because you've captured the essence of what we're trying to combat and free ourselves and all of you about. Megan says, I feel like my imagination has been bound by lots of people telling me to grow up. I think growing up as a missionary kid, I also don't want to have to depend on other people, but make sure I can support myself financially. So there's a side of me that wants to imagine and fly free. And the other side of me that says I need to be responsible, earn money for a pension and the future. And I think this is one of the things that people say, grow up or stop doing that, because you need to be the person in this world, make money, feed, all these things that need to happen. But what if all of those things can go together? They're finding studies that say in the workplace, the places where they have a lot more freedom for imagination and dreaming and creativity. The imagination is the first part of the creativity process. And then once the imagination happens, steps are taken to roll things out. They're finding that it's really much better for even business and for those responsible spaces in our world as well. So those of you who are in the chat, I know there's a number of you who are in the midst of that. You're in the midst of work and the world, and you can have imagination. How do those all come together? Let's chat about that. And by the way, anything you put in the chat, we're going to try to come back to and respond to you. So if we don't get to it immediately, still write it. If you get a thought later and it comes up and you're like, oh, I should have said that earlier, still put it in the chat, because everything that you contribute is very valuable to this space, to us and to everybody else who's here. Let's see. Such an amazing video, Michaela says. Helen said it went quickly. Richard said, what an incredible journey. Thanks, Dan. Megan says, but I also think you want to jump off the bridge, not but because you're being wild, and then you end up with a broken leg.
I've jumped off many bridges and I've broken many bones.
How many bones have you broken, Dan
Potter?
That's
part of imagination. 22 bones at the moment, and I'm done.
That's enough. Like
I'm done. That's
the end of broken bones?
End of broken bones.
Okay, but you're going to still imagine.
I am. I probably will still jump off some bridges.
There was one particular bridge, I can't remember where it was, in Michigan, right? Where we would go to the end of it and we would jump into the water. Oh, it was so awesome. We've been to a lot of bridges.
It's much better when you jump off a bridge and land in water than other things. Oh,
it's the one we would kayak on Evergreen. And we would kayak and get to this certain bridge, and then all of us would get out, go jump off a number of times. Me a number of times, Dan once.
We've jumped off lots of bridges.
Oh yeah, we have.
We've built a lot of bridges as well.
All right, let's see. I missed it. I think that was once a trivia question at MTO. Helen said, oh, how many broken bones?
22.
Remember, it's 22. So you can get that one right. James, my brother James, dentist James. He said, I also preached at the same competition that Dan did. Dan was so much better than me. I imagined my future would be better doing something else God was calling me to. Thanks, Dan, for beating me at a preaching competition so I could follow a better course of my calling in life.
I did not win that competition, guaranteed.
But he did well. Thank you for saying he did well. Wow, that's
actually good. The interesting thing is one of the judges last year at our church camp came up to me after all these years. I mean, it would have been almost 40 years under the bridge, at least.
40 years under the bridge.
Came up and he said to me, you know, Dan, that message you preached, I thought, wow, this lasted all these years. That message you preached back when you were in the competition, I think I'm starting to understand some of it. And it was like, cha-ching, but it took a long time to get there.
Megan says, I get so much joy being able to support other people who are doing creative things. Wow, that's great. So Dan in his video talked about a few scriptures. I just want to highlight them. Psalm 19, 1-2 about nature declares the glory of God. So you can go to nature and get God's demo of imagination. And then Matthew 13:34, Jesus didn't say anything without speaking in parables or stories. We interchange those two words. So the imagination that Jesus used to take people different places was incredible. And we can do that as well through stories and parables. Hebrews 11:6.
Along that line, I've done this all my life. I've seen God in places because of my imagination. But I remember a time when I was dating Suzie and I was in Oklahoma where she lived, and she had a friend called Marty Tice. And Marty was trying to teach me how to dance. I was not a dancer. And he was like, Dan, you just need to listen to these words. And I'd never heard these words. These weren't Christian songs. I didn't do a lot with non-Christian songs at the time. He said, just listen. You'll find God there. And I listened song after song, and I was blown away by the connections I saw. This is a matter of fact, one of them was a guy called Kenny Loggins. And the music, the words were amazing, but it kept talking about Lorraine. And it was this incredible picture, I believe, of love for God, but it kept talking about Lorraine. And I leaned back and said, I don't get it. I know this song is a picture of God, but it's talking about Lorraine. And he said, listen closely. And I really listened closely the next time, and I realized it wasn't Lorraine, it was Lord Rain. Oh, blew me away. Those are some of those moments where all heavens, all music, everything can declare the glory of God. Yep. We just have to be able to step in. It's very easy for us to say, I don't like it. But what if we were to go on that adventure? After we wonder and are curious, go on that adventure and find God in those places.
Yeah. Matthew 18:3, Dan pointed out as well, is unless we come as a child, in that recapture your kid, in that get that imagination humming, that's the place where we meet God. Without imagination, faith, it's impossible to please God. So God gives each of us a different perspective or a different way to view the world. And when we tap into that space and we imagine, and we're going to talk some more about that as well. So David says, are you going to teach everyone how to tell great stories? Because you are good at that.
We'll do a storytelling one sometime.
Yeah. David Taylor says, I remember you telling us this story on deck 5 in the cold, 9 at 9.
Oh,
yes, when we were living on the ship, we had a gathering of people who were very deep. They wanted to go deeper. And so we called it at 9. It was Wednesday night.
And have community.
Yeah, and we had our community, and we went through books and discussions, and we went deeper. Yeah, so there was a lot of storytelling, deep imagination. What if God would allow us to do this? What if this were true and that were true?
So this part of the webinar was basically, it's time for us to recapture our kid.
Yeah.
It's time to go back to those places and have imagination again. We don't know what the world's going to be like when this virus passes. I was talking to someone, I don't even know if we will ever shake a hand again.
Yeah.
We don't know how culture is going to change. This is the time for imagination, especially pure imagination. Go back and unlock that so that we can move forward.
Yeah, so I just want to show you a picture. This is our feature. There's a friend of ours, one of our third culture kids that we do camp with, called Jacob Faulkner. And he is a creative artist. And when we were last week, he was on our Duzie Live, and he'll be here this afternoon at 2 p.m. for our time. But he sent this picture immediately. And I just want to show you some close-ups. This is one of his particular pieces. And he's going to help us unpack this a little bit later. But think of imagination and look at these pictures. I love the way his imagination, his growth, because we were talking about seeds of imagination last week, and how the growth comes from all the different angles of anything that's touching something that can go higher. And you see how those growths are going way high to the sun. Now, I can't wait to hear him unpack it, but this is what I'm personally getting from it.
I see from this, everything is growing up. Everything that's good is growing up. And some of, if you go back to the last slide, you've got you got things moving from darkness into light. You got different flowers at different levels, and the expression, the imagination on this bald man's head. Oh, I didn't realize it's a bald man.
That's your highlight of the picture?
Oh, man.
A bald man.
Thank you, Jacob. I knew there was a connection to that picture.
So I think art is an amazing way to just roll out imagination, because you can say so much more in a picture than you can say in words.
Hi, Root.
Root is here from Austria. Thank you for joining us. She still has the Velvet Elvis book. Yeah, we did Wednesday night at 9.
Especially the part about the Jewish culture made such a difference in my thinking.
My parents are on. Yay, you made it. Tim and Joni Thomas. So I love the way they sparked my imagination, and I'm all over the place. Anybody who knows me, you know that's just my autopilot. But they didn't call me like a spaz or ADHD or any of that stuff. They called me the butterfly, and butterflies are very important to me. And so thank you. They're just giving a
butterfly,
given the little esteem that I'm a butterfly. And so they coined it. They allowed my imagination to go well with calling me a butterfly. Thank you. I love you, Mom and Dad. Thanks
butterfly,
for joining
why don't
us.
you take off on the next area about rewiring our brains?
All right. So let's go into this new section. Keep chatting. I want to show you a video. It's about neuroplasticity. Now,
try to say that backwards.
Neuroplasticity.
Neuroplasticity.
There, you did it.
Thank you.
Bravo. So neuroplasticity basically means that our brains are not hardwired. Many people say, oh, our creativity, our imagination stops at a certain time in our life, but that is not the case at all. Really, the case is that we continue, and we can continue to transform even the physical side of our brain as things happen in life. So let's just watch this.
Not so long ago, many scientists believed that the brain did not change after childhood, that it was hardwired and fixed by the time we became adults. But recent advances in only the last decade now tell us that this is simply not true. The brain can and does change throughout our lives. It is adaptable, like plastic. Hence, neuroscientists call this neuroplasticity. How does neuroplasticity work? If you think of your brain as a dynamic, connected power grid, there are billions of pathways or roads lighting up every time you think, feel, or do something. Some of these roads are well-travelled. These are our habits, our established ways of thinking, feeling, and doing. Every time we think in a certain way, practice a particular task, or feel a specific emotion, we strengthen this road. It becomes easier for our brains to travel this pathway. Say we think about something differently, learn a new task, or choose a different emotion. We start carving out a new road. If we keep travelling that road, our brains begin to use this pathway more, and this new way of thinking, feeling, or doing becomes second nature. The old pathway gets used less and less and weakens. This process of rewiring your brain by forming new connections and weakening old ones is neuroplasticity in action. The good news is that we all have the ability to learn and change by rewiring our brains. If you have ever changed a bad habit or thought about something differently, you have carved a new pathway in your brain and experienced neuroplasticity firsthand. With repeated and directed attention towards your desired change, you can rewire your brain.
All right. The thing I love about that video in particular is the part about the pathways. Those pathways that, you might have this one that's been your normal habit, rhythm, value for years and years and years, maybe your whole lifetime. But the thing about neuroplasticity and the ability that God allowed our brains to change is that we can strengthen the pathways that we want strengthened. And when we don't travel on those pathways for a while, they're like an old road that doesn't get traveled on. The grass grows up and you can't even see that it's a pathway. And I love the way this video allowed that to happen. I just want to pop into a bit of the imagination, and we'll pause in some of these portions, but let's talk about imagination and the ability to rewire our brain. There are so many effects that our imagination can have, both positive and negative. So we can have great positive and we can also have negative damaging effects. The interesting things is in the brain when they have imaging, and because of imagination and creativity, we are able, because of technology, to see and study the brain in a much more detailed way. But the brain lights up when we have positive thoughts. It lights up as light trees. So we have 8.6 billion neurons or connectors that help make these pathways that we just saw a picture of in our brain. Well, those ones that are strong and that are positive, and actually in the scientific world, they call them faith-based thoughts and feelings, those come out as light. Those ones that are negative, these neurons, these tree connectors that are negative, they call them fear-based. Don't you find that interesting? Faith and fear, thoughts and neural pathways. So our imagination, and using our imagination and lining up with God and his imagination, can have great effects. Here's a few things. We're not going to grab everything from this, but do you know that down the bottom, you can boost your immune system by focusing on positive emotions? And then right up from there, positive emotions can increase the brain's ability to make good decisions. And then right up the top, negative emotions can create nervous system chaos, but positive emotions can do the opposite. So it talks about the magnetic field and the fetal heart. Down the bottom, positive emotions create psychological benefits in your bodies. And this is what I really want to encourage you on. And like I was saying, the technology and the research keeps expanding to allow us to know more. What happens when we think, when we feel, and we're testing electrodes in different parts of the body and what they do. Now, these neural pathways that we saw, these connectabilities or these roads, are what we want to choose to intentionally strengthen to make sure we rewire our brain. In the past, we always thought about left brain and right brain. Left brain is logical, decision-making, accurate, analytical, reason. This is the one that can make the detailed scientific, provable facts. Where on the right side brain, this is like the creative person, the yearning, the creative, the artist, operates more in the right brain versus the left brain. And so these are some of the functions that typically have been assigned exclusively in the past to left and right brain functions. But what they're finding now is there are other places in the brain that has other things happening. For example, the prefrontal cortex, and the part right in the front of your brain, it is responsible for emotions, judgment, planning, and they're finding loads more things that are coming from that. It lights up when we're having these things happen in our brain.
So it doesn't put us in a box so much.
No. And then the cerebellum down the bottom, this one is responsible for movement, habits, doing, balance. So they're talking about the difference. Add into that right, left brain, like we were just talking about, right, left brain functions. Then add into the emotions and the judgment and the planning and trying to be strategic together with doing things over and over again. This really speaks of habits. And they're saying that the combination of all of these is really making a difference. There is such a difference with our mind and our body. So you can imagine, but if you don't do something with that imagination, like creativity allows us to do, you don't practice your art, practice your skill, practice your thinking, practice your writing, whatever it is that you do, by the doing part, the cerebellum, the bodily movements. If we only think about it, we're going to miss out on a lot of great benefits in our mind-body connection. So when we're thinking about what's happening here, stage 1, basically, stimuli for one or more of the 5 senses are sent to the brain. By the way, many studies are now saying there's up to 21 senses, not just our 5 senses that we know about. Mm-hmm. There's also pain and knowing where we are. Some studies are saying that imagination is actually a sense. Let's stick with that one, shall we? But stimuli from one of the senses are sent to the brain. And then stage 2, the brain deciphers it. Is it a threat or a non-threat? So this is what we were talking about a number of weeks ago about fight, flight, or freeze, the fear response. In stage 3, the body stays activated or aroused until the threat's over, until we know if it's true or not and what should be happening in that space. And then stage 4, the body returns to homeostasis or neutral, a stage of psychological calmness once the threat is gone. So we get stimuli, and then our brain has to decide, what do I do with this? What will I do with this? Do I run? Am I safe? Is there really a bear? Is there not a bear? You know, what is the truth about my situation? Should I be afraid, or should I step into imagination or faith and go for it? So your emotions affect your body organs. I think you know a lot about that. Your emotions are affecting the body as well. And let's talk about that just for a few moments. So there is this mind-body connection. Whenever we have a thought or a stimulus, like we were just talking about, I love this picture because there's chemicals that are released all throughout our body. This is a simplified version, of course. Chemicals, hormones, and different fluids and neurotransmitters, they're all released into our body to allow it to do what it needs to do, but sometimes they have negative effects. Let's look, for example, about stress. So when you have stress, which is kind of represented at the top, what kind of effects can it have in our body? Look down at the bottom. Increased heart rate. The liver converts glycogen to glucose, so you've got the energy to do what you need to do. It decreases the digestive system because that's not vital for running or something like that. Your blood pressure goes higher, and there's a dilation of the bronchioles so you can get more air. So this allows you to fly or fight or whatever. Your body is wired to respond. But when we have a lot of anxiety, and what we do with that, all of that, those dynamics within our body, it can cause a lot of internal problems in different parts of our body. But also, if we take that energy to go into the imagination possibilities, into the light, faith-based versus the fear-based response, we're going to have a whole different effect in our body. Actually, the chemicals tested by these two are very different. Now, I find this also, just think about the body. We're not going to go deep into this, but look, when you have these different responses, these different emotions in your body, this is this just shows the light up, the relationship between the emotional states and the synthesis of neurotransmitters. So this is what the chemicals are releasing according to your emotions. Right. So you see how it affects the different parts of the body. I wish we could just have a look at that. But I noticed that in happiness and enthusiasm lights up the majority of your body. The benefits of having imagination and faith-based positive responses. So we can have that perspective. So we can have the perspective that's going up, or we can be spiraling down. It is in our choice to our response to what's going on. Here's another one. This is thermal. This is what's happening thermally in the different emotions that we're feeling. And again, I wish I could look at it, but look at happiness. Happiness is the bright, the warm color. And look at depression. You see how depression lights up with a cold blue, not to the vital areas of the light of the body, right in the center, heart, lungs, stomach. These areas are not lit up in the sense of depression, where happiness is very bright, especially in the mind and the heart area. I really, and love gives a really bright, when you look at those Those are the ones that stand out bright. Also, anger is quite bright. Do you see how anger just affects the top portion of the body? I find that very fascinating. So emotions can harm your health. For example, anger hits the liver, shock goes to the kidney, stress weakens heart and brain, worry weakens the stomach, sadness weakens your lungs, anxiety affects digestion, fear affects the adrenals and the kidneys. Many of us have experienced these things. But positive or light-based also have great positive responses. Laughter is good for the blood flow. Hugs release oxytocin and combat stress. Oh, it's hard when we can't have so many hugs in this season. When you meet someone that your heart goes crazy for, your heart gets a workout. Spending time with a loved one lowers your blood pressure. Love letters lower blood cholesterol. I find that amazing. Holding hands calms the nerves.
Wait, I didn't see this bit. Spending time with a loved one lowers your blood pressure. Since we have gone on this being at home,
lockdown.
Yeah, house arrest, I'm calling it. Since we've gone on house arrest, my blood pressure
been the two of us.
has just dropped significantly. Maybe that's why. Spending time with loved ones.
Yeah.
But it doesn't say loved ones, it says loved one.
Oh, yeah. Well, there you go.
Oh, yeah.
A positive attitude lowers the risk of a heart attack. So there are effects, positively and negatively. Imagination also has effects. Studies say if you imagine it, it is as if you are doing it. Now they call it the down up or the up down response, because if you're actually involved in something in real life, you're going to have different direction of signals in your brain, but the responses are very similar. And that's why imagination, both positively and negatively, is something that we have to be very aware of and be intentional about. The mind has limitless power. So a couple parts from this I just want to highlight is you have 70,000 thoughts per day. Now, different studies say different things, but approximately Dr. Caroline Leaf says every 20 seconds, you have the opportunity to examine your thought and see what you're going to do with that thought and see what kind of perspective you're going to give it, down or up. And your conscious mind controls brain activity just about 5% of the day. Your unconscious mind controls the brain activity in your thoughts. 95, some studies say 98% of the time. It is involuntary. It is it's subconscious. So that's why when we're in our times with God and when we're like able to capture our thoughts, we want to put into our subconscious, into our memory, verses and things like that, the things that will keep our brain and our body in a positive sense. So 3 areas that I just want us to look at: the words that we say, the behaviors we do, and the emotions we feel. Those are how the imagination can roll out for us in our body-mind connection. So what about you in imagination? What are some words or some behaviors or some emotions that you say, do, or feel that you need to identify and put imagination or positive effects into? We'd love to hear from you. Say, do, feel. Because those connections in your brain, those pathways that you are reinforcing and you're growing, and those ones you are not reinforcing and you're allowing to fall away, it's really important to make those decisions. And imagination has the effects, and hopefully the effects for positivity, and that are going to be light and life and salt to ourselves, with our connection with God, and our connection with others, whether you're personally together or you're virtually together with others.
So what this is saying to me, and this is blowing my mind a little bit, is that probably the brain was created by a higher being, perhaps even a God.
Yes,
because
of course.
That kind of stuff could not just happen. I am totally convinced, and I've been forever, that God created the brain. But just look at how amazing he has created and how it oh, wow, this is incredible.
David's got a question out here. How do we recapture wonder, reopen up old pathways, discover childlike imaginations? Yeah, so if we're talking pathways, that might be a neuro pathway that has not been strengthened in a while. How do we do that? We'd love to hear from you. How do you make that happen?
Let me just speak into that for a moment. You have to start by giving yourself permission.
Yeah.
Permission to wonder. And wonder is where you are able to just daydream. You have to give yourself permission to be curious. That's when you sort of lean forward like you're going to investigate. And then you need to give yourself permission to take the adventure, to put on the backpack and to move into those spaces. Maybe it was a game you once played.
Wonder, curiosity, adventure.
Maybe it was a hobby. Maybe you need to start a brand new hobby where you have to learn things all over again. It's those kind of pathways that you have to create that actually will take you back into some of those incredible moments of imagination, and it'll grow it, and that'll actually have ripple effects over all of your life.
Megan has a question. She says, is the prefrontal cortex where Dan's goggles are?
Yeah, these are holding my prefrontal cortex in place right there.
David says, interesting that serenity is very core focused. Perhaps we can only experience serenity when we are physically still. Yeah, this was a new recent exploration in depth when we did our Lean Into Our Shh module in the flow course, which we highly encourage you to do. See the effects of being still physically, but also stilling ourselves. Be still and know that I am God. Psalm 146:10 says. This is part of probably prepping for imagination.
Yeah, it's interesting because some of those verses I learned as a child about taking every thought captive, don't be anxious about anything. All these verses, when you look at the brain, you look at imagination, it's like, oh, that totally makes sense. It isn't just, I'm going to change my mind. It's like you change your whole body when you step into these things. These are not just great little principles if we follow Jesus. These are life principles for everyone. We need to focus on him and set our mind on things that are light, things that are faith, rather than things that are fear.
Yep, that's right. And another set of studies, I wanted to just put it out here. Well, imagination, like should you imagine, especially in the workplace and in creativity and like imagining something that you're going to do something with. Studies say that, yes, it's very important to be in that space and have that still imagination time. But there are two things that really improve creativity, imagination. And one is exercise and the other is sleep. So another plug for these rhythms that are very vital to our body, exercise and sleep. So they say that people who are trying to dream and create things, and when they put the electrodes on the brain and they study it, they find that there are triggers that begin, but then when somebody goes and exercises or they have a good sleep and they're not necessarily in the space where they're trying, and I think this is where the subconscious comes in, where they're not trying to create, that's where the ideas flow. And that's why they encourage people who are good with dreams. The dream state, right after you wake up, is the best place for these imaginative ideas. That's why it's really important to have something, they say, near your bed to just write, because that's when your neuroplasticity has been refreshed and everything can fire like crazy. Quick story.
Thomas Edison, one of my heroes, he created so much things, but he's the guy who, you've ever heard of the penny drop? The penny dropped. What that actually comes from is Thomas Edison would take a penny and he'd put it between his knees and he would take a nap. And underneath his knees, he would have a pan. And when he relaxed enough that the penny dropped, he would wake up and he'd have all these ideas and he would just start writing. And most of his inventions came from the penny dropped, because
just going into that
REM place. Mm-hmm. He got that thought, the penny woke him up and he began to write.
Yeah.
I was just imagining what it'd be like to exercise when you sleep. It would be 2 in 1. It would just be, I'm gonna have to think about that. Use my imagination.
So the cerebellum and actually doing things Thomas Edison, he invented when he did it repeatedly. And artists and creative people and people who are in innovation and imagination and creativity, they find the correlation between doing it a lot of times and thinking about creating and dreaming. So some people don't come up with the dreams just one off. It is that repeated pattern, that repeated rhythm of being creative and being in that imaginative state and try to do something with it.
I would love to hear quickly if Dr. James is still on, just how imagination works as a dentist. I know you're researching, you have the latest things going on, but I would love to hear that as well. But let's go back to some of these things that we're saying.
So Dr. James, tell us about it. Let's see.
Right there.
Helen's going to class. Oh, Dale's talking about trauma. That's why trauma is so dangerous to our body, because it rewires the emotions and the body system. That's right. It impacts kids and changes them for life if it's not worked through effectively. Right. Yeah. So the trauma and like everything that happened, this is like the freeze or the fall response to some kind of a trauma. Dale is a therapist, so he's helping people. It is possible, isn't it, Dale, to help these people out of it? Sometimes it takes a long time.
That's why we had to go through our debriefing at the beginning of our 100 Days to Live, because we were at that frozen place, and it allowed us to set up some new pathways.
And it made such a difference to us. Michaela just points out, thank you. Love that all this shows the importance of loving others and community.
So good.
Yeah, so it's not just about ourselves, and it's not just about us and God, but it's about loving others as well. Megan says, Dale, so when you've experienced trauma, are you saying that your responses will be different than what Susie's just shared? So she's asking for a few more details there. I'd love to hear more about how trauma can affect how your brain thinks. Can we have Dale do a session? That's a great idea, Megan. Dale, what do you think? We become rewired to survive only. So that's what happens. The brain rewires to like put it on minimal because there's so much going on. Yeah, we'd love to hear you, Dale. Come. Therefore, the process of rediscovery is very difficult, but it can be done. But it's a very cognitive process. And generally, this may take professional trauma processing help.
Definitely.
And time. And time. Time is our friend in that situation as well. There's cognitive behavioral therapy that therapists like Dale, it is you're thinking about and you're helping change what you say, what you do, and how you behave.
And just to bring this back into perspective, all of this has to do with imagination, the way we think, the way we form those concepts that actually move into reality in our body or in our world.
Exercise and sleep help creativity, and Dan's a great dreamer. Yes, thank you, David. This is when, that is when my artists and many artists and writers get inspiration within the dream state. Many have a dream journal. Yeah, Dan has a dream journal. He has his journal near his bed because he gets his best ideas in the middle of the night or straight after awakening. I don't dare talk to him. When he's going strong, I just let him flow. And David Taylor says so many creative people have a regular habit of long daily walks, thinking and moving.
Definitely.
Since we've been in lockdown, Dan and I have taken 30-minute to an hour and a half walk every day.
About 4 miles a day.
And so we're just finding that we get a thought in our head, we chat about it, we just go on the walk, get fresh air, and get our blood pumping and clean out our toxins.
I'm the timekeeper. It's always more than an hour. So.
Okay. It's my goal to do at least 30 minutes. Yeah. Dolly was famous for this, about having a long daily walks, or the dream journal, Dale.
Sure.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we've crossed our 1 hour mark, and we're willing to stay and chat some more. Suze, did you have any handouts or anything else that we need to go through?
Let's see. Now, this is from last week, but I'm happy to share this one. It is 10 ways to grow your imagination. It's a PDF there. It's also going to be inside our flow course. And And so I want to share that 10 ways to grow your imagination. That came from our last week, but in case you weren't here last week, we want to make that available to you. And then we have a second one in a moment. I'll put it up as well. And that's how your imagination pleases God. So it's just a document about that if you want some fuel for this. And as always, we would love to have you chat, reach out to us, send us an email.
You can share them both at once.
Oh, okay, great. Send us an email, chat with us on socials, call us any way that you can connect with us. If
Don't come over. Do not come over.
No, we're in self isolation. Well, we're sort of selfing.
House arrest.
Lockdown, whatever we want to call it. But yeah, we'd love to have a chat with you. If any of you would like to chat more about this, or you need some coaching or any kind of support in any way to help you grow those positive light-filled brain responses versus the fear-filled ones, we would love to have that connection with you.
Here's Dr. James.
Dale said it's the dream journal. Thank you for clarifying. Dr. James says imagination is critical to do dentistry. Note here, Dr. James is the best dentist in the world. I am completely biased, and I'm not changing that because he is. Every day I look at x-rays and have to use my imagination to reconstruct what I see in two-dimensional into three-dimensional tooth. This has to happen in my mind before I can pick up my hand piece.
Yeah.
When I'm going to build a crown or a denture, same thing. I must see it. Wow, that's fascinating because they do have 3D imaging, but you look at the 2D, but you've trained yourself to get it to the 3D, and then you go on the tooth or the situation and you make it happen.
I'm living proof.
That is fascinating. Yeah, me too.
There.
He has made our
Thank you for
teeth so
using
good.
your
Yes,
imagination.
thank you. Wow. No, Megan is adding that in. She wants to have James Thomas also on a webinar on medical psychological. Maybe we can make that happen.
Let me just stop for a moment
awesome.
and tell you what we experienced on Sunday. For the first time in 16 years, we had all of Susie's family in one place online.
So 8 of us siblings, mom and dad, and then some of our children.
4 different countries, I think 4 different states, but we were all there and we had a great time. Susie's dad gave a little message and we had communion, but then it opened
worship
up
in 3 different locations.
Susie's got a whole bunch of scientists, really, what do you call them? Smart people in her family. And they started talking about the virus.
Doctor of chemistry, dentists, doctors.
Oh, I wish I would have. We did record it.
Creativity experts.
We did record it. I would love to. I'm not sure if we put it on, but it was so great just to hear these people who are deep in science and their imagination saying, here's the fact and here's where it could go. Oh, I was just totally blown away. This was a meeting of the intellectuals. And during that time, I said nothing. Nothing.
Yeah, but your brain was
My
working.
brain was working, but it was fascinating.
Yeah.
I love getting people like that in the room. Thanks, Megan.
So Dan earlier was talking about, in the area of recapture your kid, about what's the difference between wonder, curiosity, and adventure. So I wonder what you're thinking. I wonder what you're thinking about that, and would love to have you over the week just respond to that. Because to me, I think wonder and curiosity is more internal and begins to be responsive externally, but adventure can be in your brain, but it can also be like that cerebellum. It's something that we do or we say. So imagination that gets stuck only in our brain is good, but there's so many benefits to yourself and to your God connection and to others. If we allow those to just roll out, it's going to make a bigger effect as world changers on the world.
Megan, I just wanted to speak of what you said. Curiosity killed the cat, but it captured the kid. Never forget that. Curiosity may have killed the cat, but it captured the kid. Curiosity is a God invention, and we need to use that to move forward.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So anything else? Dale, you said, Dan, you were growing and rewiring the pathways of your brain during that time.
That's right.
Release
He has
that.
to have glasses to hold in his prefrontal cortex because it's just like,
Yeah.
Oh.
Well, thank you all for your time. If there's anything else, we'll wait for a moment. And maybe for those who came on late, we'll play my video again.
Okay. Yeah. And also we just want, we can exit with that,
We'll
right?
exit
For
with
those
the
who
video
want
if
to
you came
stay.
in late.
Just want to say at 2:00, which is how many hours from now? Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4 hours from now, we're going to have another webinar. And Jacob Falkinson, who is the artist, Faulkner, who is the artist that had that, those growing things from the bald head. He is going to be on with us, and we're going to interview him about the process. If any of you want to come back, you're completely welcome to. Also, for those of you who are watching by replay, we want to thank you for making it all the way to this point. We are so grateful that you have joined us live here in the chat and have interacted with us. And for those of you who have just come on the replay, and we have Duzie Live every Tuesday. We have new times now, 9 a.m. and 2 p.m. our time here locally, Eastern Standard Time. And every week you just need to register because we have new links. Register and you'll get that link and you can just hop on and join us here. And we thank you for joining us.
I just had an amazing idea. What if next week we do imagination again? We were going to move to courageous imagination, but what if we did imagination but did it based on interviews and get like Dale and James and some other people
if you guys are available
to talk to them. We'll tell you more if we get the details on that, but that'd be really a fun discussion.
Yeah, thanks Megan for
to have
that
a few faces there and really look at you've got imagination from our point of view, but let's look at it from a few different points of view.
Before you sign out, those of you who are still with us, we'd love to hear what is one highlight, something that really stands out to you or that you learned that you want to take away from this hour that we've been hanging out together. If you don't mind, just put it right there in the chat. We would love to hear from you. What stood out for you from this time we've had together? So we tried to talk about you can live in a world of pure imagination by taking 2 steps. The first step is what?
First step is recapture your kid. Go there. Go to that place that used to be and relaunch that. Move forward in it.
And the second step to live in a world of pure imagination is to rewire your brain and allow for the right pathways, the light, faith-filled pathways versus the fear-faith pathways to be reinforced. Get rid of those fear-based ones. Sometimes we need our community. Sometimes we need our help, but we can rewire our brain. We are transformed, Romans 12 says, by renewing our mind. And this speaks to the rewiring of our brain. And we can do that every day. We are not stuck where we are. We can go further and farther and on more adventures than ever before.
And it's interesting in the scripture when it talks about God knew our frame, it's exactly the same word as God knew our imagination. He's not against imagination. It's through imagination that we move forward with ourselves, with our world, and with our God.
Yeah. So thank you, Ruth. Ruth says the way how the brain works. That was her awareness. Cheryl says we're never too old to imagine and grow in our creativity. Right. David says to discover and rediscover imagination to reach and experience connection.
Okay. Good.
Yeah. Awesome.
All right. So thank you all
Keep
for
chatting
coming.
in there if you don't mind.
Keep the chat going. I'll play my video again because I know some people came in late. If you already saw it, you don't have to watch it again. I've seen it 20 times, but I'm going to watch it again.
I'm going to watch again too. Yeah. So, God bless you. Thank you so much for joining us on Duzie Live, living in a land of pure imagination. Don't forget to recapture your kid and to rewire your brain. God bless you. We are loving life.
And we're seeing good days. A memoir of imagination. I was born at a very young age with a great sense of imagination, as was every other human child who's ever been created in the image of God. My imagination grew as I was given permission to live fully alive by cultivating wonder, curiosity, and adventure, which I gladly did. I come from a very normal family of great Imagineers. People, simple people, who daily use stories from the past to build connections towards the future. I could not read until I was a teenager. I'm dyslexic, which means I am highly creative. My brain is always building new images and connections. Thus, letters and words and numbers and even concepts are always seen by my brain as new, like something I've never seen before. Thus, reading, writing, and arithmetic for me, they were quickly replaced by reinventing connections through creativity, change, and community. My mom, because I couldn't read, would tell me stories about God and our heritage. She would read Disney relentlessly to me, and my imagination grew wildly. My dad would take me to the wood shop and show me a dead tree stump. He would cut it into slices to show me what he could see on the inside. And then he would create from the stump a beautiful clock, just like he imagined. My great-grandfather, O.P. Eastman, would look across the river and create images of a bridge in his mind. He would later build those bridges all across Michigan. My grandpa Baldwin, on Thanksgiving Day, would look high up in the pine trees and point to one treetop. He could see in his imagination which top 8 feet would make the best Christmas tree. Then he would climb up the tree and bring it down for me to see. My Grandma B, as she lay on her deathbed, would lift her old vein-covered hands and play the piano as she saw it in her imagination, just like it had always been at the edge of her fingerprints. Everyone, I believe, was created with imagination and expected to keep it growing throughout their whole life. But sadly, according to Professor Ken Robinson, kids today start losing their imagination as soon as they enter school. But that doesn't seem to bother most people because they only want kids to grow up and join the chorus of productive adults who long to exploit knowledge only to solve problems, rather than explore thinking through imagination to discover and rediscover several possibilities of connection. When I was 12 years old, I surprisingly learned that I had not lost my imagination. Up to that time, I believed everyone was living in the land of pure imagination. But then I preached my first sermon. It was at a church district event where teens could perform a talent. Now, I was a young magician, but they didn't have a category for me, so I chose preaching. And my 10-minute message was the gospel according to Willy Wonka. It was amazing. I talked about the golden ticket. Everyone on earth could find one. I talked about Jesus like the candy man. He could take the sunrise and sprinkle it with dew. He could take a rainbow and wrap it with a sigh. He could take tomorrow and dip it in a dream, all to make the world taste good. There were also the children in the chocolate factory, all who had received a golden ticket, but they lacked the fruit of the Spirit, especially self-control, and lost the treasure. But there was one named Charlie, who also had taken what was not his and touched what he was not supposed to touch, but through confession and connection, he won the heart of the Creator, thus winning the entire kingdom. Now, understand, the judges at this event, a panel of distinguished pastors, could not see what I could see. They told me this: stick to the word. Wow, it broke my heart because I met God in that story, as well as so many others. The Wizard of Oz was clearly about God's value of thinking, having a heart, courage, and the sense of belonging. Chitty Chitty Bang Bang was joyfully announcing the value of childlike imagination against the kingdom of darkness. There was Snow White, Cinderella, The Jungle Book, Pinocchio, and a host of other books and movies that took me into worlds much like my own, where new beginnings were possible through transformation, from death by resurrection into life. Only believe. Psalms 19, 1 and 2 says, "All heaven declares the glory of God. The skies proclaim the works of his hands. Day after day they pour forth speech. Night after night they reveal knowledge." Look around. Look up. The sound of God's voice is everywhere. It's in our books and movies and songs. No matter who wrote them or who sung them, they're there. They're in our cities and in our country, in the oceans and the mountains, along the trails we walk, and in the places we dare not even go. God's storehouse is everywhere that imagination allows us to flow. But so many people I have met could not see any of this with their imagination. In Matthew 13:34 it says, Jesus spoke all these things to the crowd in parables. He did not say anything to them without using a parable. He was talking to people's imagination, giving them something to explore rather than a piece of knowledge to exploit. He did not come to solve a problem through grand pieces of information, but instead, he came that we might have life through imagination. I have faithfully attended 4 different Bible colleges and universities, all preparing me to communicate the gospel of Jesus to the next generation around the world. But none of them, that's right, none of them offered courses on imagination, parables, or storytelling. But that is exactly how Jesus changed the world. If we have faith, according to Hebrews 11:6, we have chosen to believe with our imagination that God exists and that God, whom we imagine, will reward us when we seek him through our imagination. And it is impossible to please God without the belief we have seen in our imagination, which is also called faith. Read the whole chapter of Hebrews 11. It is all about people who saw and experienced God through their imagination. I belong to the greatest nation on earth, and it is called imagination. It is the place from which I see light, I live life, and I love myself, my world, and my God. It's interesting that the word imagination comes from 2 very important words, image and notion. Image is something you can see, but also we must remember that we were created in the image of God. Notion, on the other hand, is a conception or belief about something. So imagination must be a place in our brain which is like God, that enables us to be able to conceive or believe something not real into reality. Thus we must recapture our imagination by returning to our sense of wonder, curiosity, and adventure. The modern world leads us to believe there are only 5 senses: sight, sound, touch, smell, and taste. But imagination also demands we explore our forgotten sense of wonder, curiosity, and adventure. I am who I am today because I live fully alive through my imagination. I hear God's voice. I dream his dreams. I see his kingdom coming. I create unforgettable moments. I experience the future. And I work in the power of God's Spirit because imagination for me is real. I choose to believe, and so can you. The Passion Translation in Matthew 18:3 puts it this way: learn this well. Unless you dramatically change your way of thinking and become teachable and learn about heaven's kingdom realm with wide-eyed wonder of a child, you will never be able to enter in. May you be blessed to see your life, your world, and your God vividly and with vibrancy as you recapture your God-given imagination through a sense of wonder, curiosity, and adventure, to believe beyond what your eyes can see. This has been my memoir of imagination.